Out by thanking everyone for joining us tonight for this important discussion. We're going to be focusing on pending legislation on housing security. Tonight, we are really fortunate to be joined by two very knowledgeable individuals on this important issue, Senator Julie Gonzales and Bruce Eisenhauer. Senator Gonzales represents Senate District 34, which is situated within Denver County. She serves as the Majority Caucus Chair. She is the chair of the Senate Veterans State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, and is a member of the Appropriations and Legislative Audit Committees. She is the sponsor of several housing-related bills, including Senate Bill 173, Rights and Residential Lease Agreements, and Senate Bill 242, which expands the eligible use of the Housing Development Grant Fund. She'll be speaking to us tonight about pending legislation intended to address housing security in Colorado, and hopefully will be willing to take a few questions from us, time permitting. And we're also fortunate to be joined by Bruce Eisenhauer, who is the legislative liaison with the Colorado Department of Local Affairs. He'll be speaking to us about the state's efforts to promote housing stability and security and related legislative efforts. Bruce has extensive experience working with municipal governments and experience in economic development. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our esteemed speakers, starting with Senator Gonzales.
Thank you so much for convening this conversation, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate and share a little bit about the work that's happening at the Capitol. I represent Northwest and downtown Denver here at the state Capitol, and am really excited about all of the housing legislation that we are tackling this year. You know, what I'll say just as an entry point is that the COVID crisis and the ensuing economic crisis, along with the racial reckoning, really laid bare all of the crises that we are navigating as a society and certainly as a state. And what we have seen is that people who are struggling to make ends meet in the before times have just had to navigate unprecedented crisis. And we also know that crisis exacerbates inequality. And so the people who have been hardest hit in terms of the health impacts of the pandemic, in terms of the economic crisis, have been Black and Brown Coloradans, have been working class Coloradans. And so it's incumbent upon us as we tackle these issues at the legislature to keep those dynamics in mind as we are addressing our policies. And so I'll start by just giving you a sense of how I, at least, am approaching housing issues this year at the Capitol. I sort of think about housing issues in three different buckets. The first being how we address the landlord and tenant relationship, because there's been a lot of scrutiny around that relationship, particularly given just all of the tension where, you know, as I mentioned before, folks who were living paycheck to paycheck in the good old days of, you know, pre-pandemic, as well as folks who may be struggling for the very first time in their lives to make rent. So issues around that landlord-tenant relationship, how long the eviction process lasts, what defenses you can raise when you find yourself in eviction court, how often your landlord can raise the rent on you in a calendar year. All of those are questions that I guess I would place into that first bucket of issues surrounding that landlord and tenant relationship. A second bucket that I would submit for your consideration is how we actually go about building more permanent affordable housing. We know that there are a number of barriers in that regard, certainly in regards to the financing, as well as to what tools local governments actually have at their disposal to go and encourage and in some cases require such development. And then the third bucket that I would build for y'all is how we support people as as they're navigating homelessness. We know that just if you're in Denver or anywhere in the seeing the tent cities that have popped up as folks are navigating really unprecedented crisis, and how do
It looks like we may have lost our connection with Senator Gonzales. Unless that's on my end, can others hear me?
Yep, you're fine. I think you're right that it is Senator Gonzales.
Okay. Hopefully she'll pop back in. Maybe let's just give it a minute.
It looks like she's going to dial back in.
Okay. Well, thank you for bearing with us. In the evening, I was hoping the demands on our broadband were a little less, but I guess you just never can predict. And as we're waiting for Senator Gonzales to get logged back in, for those who may not have heard, she is only with us until around 5:50 this evening. So when she concludes her remarks, we hope to have a little bit of time for questions. And probably the most effective way to do that would be just to unmute and chime in with a question, should you have one, but you're also welcome to put questions in the chat and we'll try and capture those as well.
I think we might have lost Bruce too.
Oh no. Okay, I think Senator Gonzales is coming back in. Hopefully Bruce will do the same.
Hey there, sorry about that. It looks like the internet just went down here at the Capitol.
Oh no, we were just noting that we think we lost Bruce as well. So our guests of honor, there's some internet connections going around.
I just jumped on the phone. Apologies for that. But what was the last thing what was the last thing you heard me say?
You were just finishing talking up kind of the different categories of legislation and sort of concluding that really, remarking on the tent cities that we're seeing pop up and kind of the just unprecedented need right now.
And so just the last thing I'll say is that in the process navigate a number of policies, if a bill regarding is, I usually am the Senate sponsor. I'm likely to be the Senate sponsor or a co-prime sponsor. And so with the group trying to get back on it, we figure it out.
Senator Gonzales, we really appreciate you muddling through the connection and technology issues. I'm personally having a little trouble hearing. I'm not sure if others are as well. It seems like our audio is breaking up. I'll let you proceed and hopefully it'll clear up.
Okay. Let me see. I think maybe I'm happy to answer any questions if folks have them.
We would love to open it up for audience questions. I know we have several members, if not all of our Legislative Action Committee lobbyists that focus on housing issues. It's an issue that's very important to the league, and we're joined by several others as well. I would just encourage everyone to go ahead and unmute and direct your questions directly to Senator Gonzales. Kathy, go ahead.
Hi, Senator Gonzales. Thank you. I was happy to see that Senate Bill 173 passed the Senate today. And I was wondering if you could kind of give us a rundown of the amendments and what the bill does and what it's bound for. I think you're muted, Senator.
You would think that by now I'd figure it out, but here we are, dang. You know, there were a flurry of amendments that came to the bill in its first committee, which was the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, and a number of amendments that attached onto the bill yesterday during second reading on the floor. And just to walk through the broad tenets of Senate Bill 173, there's two main parts to the policy. One that addresses the eviction court process and makes reforms to ensure that every step of the process is fair and equitable for all parties. The second big section of the bill really pertains to late fees and puts guardrails around when those late fees can be charged and how much late fees can be charged. And so the upon amendments, as the bill is now coming out of the Senate, the bill will, in many instances, require, number of the amendments were actually technical or softening of some of the eviction court reform language to ensure that there was fairness and parity at both sides. We didn't want to take a process that right now feels like there are fewer rights and protections for renters and versus landlords, and then flip that. We wanted to make sure that it was pretty balanced throughout. So there are a number of amendments to that point. One of the things, though, that we did have to attach onto the bill in regards to some of the concerns from my colleagues in the Senate in hearing feedback from opposition, the apartment association, the realtors, what have you, the debt creditors bar, were we had actually struck requirements around paying appeals bonds or paying full or partial amounts of rent in order to raise warrant of habitability claims, and instead through amendments unstruck that language, but then put in indigency clauses so that in the event that an individual is declared indigent by a court, at that point they wouldn't be required to pay those bonds in order to access justice. The second section of the bill, again, as it pertains to late fees, after amendments, initially we had set a 14-day grace period through which individuals, tenants would be able to pay their full rent payment without incurring a late fee. And the guardrails around the late fee amounts that could be charged started out at a maximum, whichever was greater between the two, of either $20 or 2.5% of rent, which when Coloradans were polled, 81% of Coloradans agreed with that 2.5% would be a reasonable amount. And yet, in deference to some of the concerns from my colleagues, we narrowed that to a 7-day grace period and the greater of a $50 or a 5% maximum late fee and penalty. And so the bill has now cleared the Senate and is on its way to the House, where Representatives Gonzales Gutierrez and Caraveo will be carrying the bill forward.
Great, thank you for that information. That is really helpful, and that is definitely a bill that the League has been watching closely. We're very supportive of it, and we're really excited that that is moving through nicely. Are there other questions from our audience?
I have one. I'm Cindy, and I live on Capitol Hill. And we just completed what's called our small area plan that gives our values and what we want in development and all kinds of things in our neighborhood. And the big one that came through is we want affordable housing. But we kept hearing that the Telluride amendment stops us from demanding or requiring or all of that. Where does that stand right now?
It's a great question. And I also love the fact that you all are talking as a neighborhood around your values. I wish more communities did that, quite frankly. I wish legislators engaged in those conversations in more concrete ways as well. You're right. The Telluride court decision has prevented a lot of action from taking place. We've seen here in the city and county of Denver that, and so just, are y'all familiar with the Telluride decision, or would it be helpful to give a sense of what that is?
I think probably a brief explanation would be really helpful.
Certainly. The 90-second version is back in the 80s. The city of Boulder wanted to put forward rent control. And so before that municipality could even make that determination, the state passed a statewide prohibition on rent control. About 20 years later, in the early 2000s, the city of Telluride tried to build worker housing, and developers sued and went to the Colorado Supreme Court. And the Telluride decision actually limited some of the tools that local governments could utilize to require affordable housing to be constructed. And so in the ensuing years, we've seen the city and county of Denver, for instance, create voluntary programs. Boulder and other jurisdictions have utilized those voluntary programs, but it's real hard to put teeth in that, you know? Now, I live in an affordable housing unit thanks to the voluntary work that the voluntary program that Denver created. But oftentimes what you'll see is the workaround is a city or a local government will say, hey, you can either build affordable housing or you can pay a fee, and that goes into an affordable housing fund. And then there's always fights around where that affordable housing ends up getting built, right? And so our bill, House Bill 1117, which has now passed the House and is now on its way, myself and Senator Robert Rodriguez will be working on this legislation to just say, nope, these are useful tools, these are important tools, and to repair that and make clear that local municipalities do have the power and jurisdiction to require developers to build that affordable housing. So that's another tool that's going to be really important for us in our toolbox.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that explanation and the shedding some light on what the path forward is in that regard. Senator Gonzales, I know you have other commitments this evening and probably need to hop off now. I just want to thank you on behalf of the League for joining us this evening. Thank you for all the work that you're doing in this area and many others. And we look forward to working with you into the future.
Thank y'all so much. Sorry for the technical difficulties on our end, but Zoom life. Take care, y'all.
Bye-bye.
You're in good hands with Bruce. Bye.
That is the perfect segue into Bruce. As I mentioned, as we were kicking things off, Bruce Eisenhauer is the legislative liaison with the Colorado Department of Local Affairs. And I am going to turn it over to him so he can talk about some of the efforts that he's involved in around this important issue.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me this evening. We're truly lucky to have a senator like Senator Gonzales being the voice and the advocate that she is. As she had indicated, there's probably not a housing bill that goes through the Senate that Julie doesn't touch in some way, shape, or form. And it's been wonderful working with her. She is actually the sponsor of a couple of bills that the department initiated this year, one of which will actually be signed into law tomorrow. That was House Bill 1054, which provides an exception for state-funded benefits for individuals who do not have or cannot prove lawful presence. There's an exception now in law, or will be tomorrow, that they do not have to provide legal status to receive housing benefits in the state of Colorado. I think we're the first state in the nation to do something like that. So it's great to partner with an individual who has such a strong passion to see these types of changes occur within the state. Another one is House Bill 1121. That one also deals with some tenancy issues, and primarily that if an individual does face eviction, current law says they only have 48 hours to move their possessions out. That's oftentimes when the sheriff shows up and starts throwing their possessions out to the curb, and they're lucky if they're able to salvage them from that. This bill will change that and at least provide, I think it's about 10 days, that the individual have that opportunity to pack up and move their possessions, whether it's to a friend's house, a storage unit, or something like that. But if they're working, at least they have a weekend involved in that period of time and have some dignity in being able to hopefully retain their possessions and get those out so they don't lose everything and being kind of kicked out into homelessness. Also, that bill would provide that for individuals who are on a month-to-month tenancy, month-to-month rent, that the landlord can't raise the rent more frequent than once every 12 consecutive months of occupancy. We've seen some instances. The Division of Housing is one of the divisions within the Department of Local Affairs. And through the Mobile Home Dispute Resolution Program, there have been a couple of cases reported where an individual has faced rent increases more frequently than once a year. In a couple cases, it's been fairly frequent, and it's really hard to budget and kind of prepare for that over a period of time. The bill would also say that you have to provide 60 days notice of a rent increase so that you have a little bit of notice of what's going to happen and when that will occur. You know, we all love Colorado, and the fact that prices have escalated dramatically is probably of no surprise to anybody. But in 2007, Colorado ranked 18th in the highest rent in the nation for rental units. By 2019, we moved up to number 6. So in that short period of time, to go from 18 to number 6 in the nation is really a dramatic increase. And it really puts Coloradans, many of them, in a cost burden situation. That's also true with home prices. We were number 6 as of March 2001 in the nation in terms of the average home price for individuals trying to buy a home. That really equates to, it's estimated about 315,000 Colorado households are paying more than half of their income for rent or mortgages, more than half of their income. That's just astronomical when you think about that. Half of your cost to go for that doesn't leave an individual very much left to pay groceries and transportation and the other basic needs that we have as a society. So many of these types of legislations that are going forth this year are wonderful. Our department, and through the Division of Housing, has also been tasked with a lot of the emergency rental assistance programs that have come forth as a result of the pandemic. Since that initiated, we've had over 50,000 applications from individuals seeking rental assistance. That equates to over $162 million in requests. And this is really just less than a year's period of time from when the pandemic hit to when some of the first dollars or stimulus dollars were made available for these purposes. We're working to kind of get through the backlog. We've seen a dramatic increase from January, and we had also had to shift from some state dollars to federal dollars. Each program has different requirements, so we have to retool the application process and that sort of thing with each and every one of those. But to me, it's very significant when you look at that. For I'm not sure what we're averaging now, but still more than 100 applications each and every day. For a while during the early parts of this year, it was over 200 to 300 applications that we were receiving each and every day of the week for rental assistance, 7 days a week. So we're hoping as we start coming out of the pandemic, people getting back to work, that we will see that diminish, but it's going to take a while because it's not, the pandemic and the recovery aren't going to have equity in the way we recover either. As it's been described by the JBC and many members there, it's kind of a K-shaped recovery form that we're facing, that we'll see some industries and some sectors respond very quickly. Others are going to take a little longer time to get back to those kind of pre-pandemic situations that we had. The JBC, and in fact, the long bill's going on tonight in the House, so I'm here filling that role too. There was another amendment added. The Senate added it. It's $5 million for emergency rental assistance for undocumented individuals, because they oftentimes don't want to go and can't go through the normal processes. But if it does require personal identifying information, that population is oftentimes very concerned that if they're on a list of some sort, that will be turned over to ICE or some other agency and they could face deportation. So this particular program works through a nonprofit entity that's able to work and provide those benefits and not collect a lot of that personal identifying information, but provide the support and information that they need. As well as the JBC, through the budget process and through some of the stimulus dollars, there's been $800 million set aside for special stimulus dollars, one-time money that will go to state agencies. From our department's perspective, and Senator Gonzales is a sponsor on one of these, is it'll be $15 million that will be provided in Senate Bill 242 for the purchase, renovation, or continual of renting hotels and motels for non-congregate housing for individuals who are homeless or facing homelessness. So as we found with the pandemic, congregate shelters that we most typically saw are not the things that we want to do. That's not the best practice of bringing a bunch of people together in an enclosed environment and housing them even overnight. But we want to keep them separated as much social distance as we can. And this bill will provide a big opportunity for that. There's also one, the Affordable Housing Incentive Program. Another $13 million will be allocated for that particular program. And that has three distinct different buckets to it. One of those is for local governments that provide certain incentives to help incentivize affordable development within the community, either through new construction of rental units or new construction of home ownership programs. But if they do, for example, added density or reduce parking regulations requirements for apartments or on new construction that benefits the affordable housing, they can apply for a grant where they can get a minimum of $100,000 on up, kind of depending upon the size of their project, for these types of bonuses that they're having to reduce some of the barriers that exist to get affordable housing done within the community. Another aspect provides them actually resources, because sometimes local governments don't have those types of regulations in place and they need to make zoning and land use changes within their codes. This will provide them money to do that, where they can help hire consultants to come in and work with them to identify certain strategies within the community to break down these barriers. And the third part of that kind of is even one step below that. Oftentimes communities will have or begin to have discussions on, we want affordable housing, but they're not sure what it is or how to go about it. Through the Division of Housing, we have a toolkit program that really helps communities initiate these conversations. It will do needs analysis where they can more specifically identify what segment or what particular product will be most successful within their community. Is it senior housing? Is it 50% AMI? Is it worker housing? Those types of things will help pinpoint more of what can be done to do that. So those bills have just been introduced. They will be forthcoming, and there will be probably a few others coming as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or other things that we do. The Division of Housing, for example, we're involved in the whole continuum of housing. We provide grants and loans across the state, any ranging from homeless shelters all the way up through home ownership. We also administer about 8,000 housing vouchers through the Housing Choice Program, more commonly known as the Section 8 program, but we administer that on a monthly basis for a lot of the smaller housing authorities across the state, as well as certain state vouchers that we have to administer well. So we have kind of do that whole gamut, whole area of continuum of affordable housing.
Well, thank you, Bruce, for all that information. That is really helpful. And I think especially, because everyone's mind is kind of on funding right now with the budget debate going on, it's really helpful to hear how state funds are going to get channeled, to try and meet the housing needs that are out there. I do have a question. I'm wondering if you can speak to the federal money that's coming in. There's been a lot of talk recently as well about just the massive amounts of federal stimulus money that are coming in. And it's my understanding that, significant portions of that will be dedicated to housing. I've heard some people refer to the amount as, having the potential to be transformational. And I'm wondering if you can shed some light on what that might look like and just where are we headed with all that?
Where is that crystal ball on my desk when I need it? It's true. We're hearing a lot of the same thing, and we're really waiting for information to come through the federal treasury, who often gives the guidance on what this money will be available. There's been multiple buckets that have been available. The funding that we currently have from the federal government, we have about 247 million roughly in emergency rental assistance. The next bucket that's being discussed, really the kind of the $2 trillion investment in America, that one, there have been and is a lot of discussion on hopefully what will equate to some transformational types of funding opportunities. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like or exactly when that's going to be available. One thing we hope is that there will be some time available to spend that money as well. If you look around Denver anywhere, you see a lot of cranes around. There's a lot of construction going on that has been going on, continues to go on. It takes time to get, not just here in Denver, but across the state, to kind of get plugged into even the contractor's time frame of when they can start taking on projects as well. With that type of money that they're talking about coming into each and every state, we have already seen substantial increases in raw materials. I think we're probably going to see labor and construction rates going up as well as a result of that, just because they're going to be kind of flooded with activity from, you look at the folks that do some of the infrastructure work that begins a new construction, if it's a subdivision or what have you, but there's a lot of infrastructure that goes in there. If they're laying new pipe, new roads, there'll be a lot of money for roads and bridges across the state. So their contractors are going to be really kind of flooded with work coming up soon too. So we can only hope that there will be ample time that we can make these investments strategically and really do some transformational work and trying to reduce the shortage of affordable housing units that we see across the state. Some may think some of the rural areas may not be challenged with this, but in fact they are, largely because there's little housing stock available. Even as people have left some of the communities, some of the housing stock is so old, it has asbestos, lead-based paint, those types of things that are really expensive to mitigate. And in some cases, it's cheaper just simply to tear it down and build new. But they're faced with many challenges as well for affordable housing in communities you may not think would, but they certainly are. So it is something that reaches all four corners of the state, rural, metro, statewide.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're definitely feeling that in communities across the board, and are able to observe it in our communities. I would encourage our participants to just go ahead and unmute. I'm sure there are questions for Bruce, so please jump in.
Bruce, I have one. I think I heard that, or you may have heard that I live on Capitol Hill, and we are noticing that there needs to be a couple of types of housing for the homeless people. There's a huge challenge coming from the mentally challenged people. And what do you envision as the path in the ideal world to start to help these people with services and a place to sleep?
That's a great question, Cindy. And one that, and you started to address it well. We need to have supported services that go along with housing. For a lot of the housing, of the homeless population, individuals there is a high prevalence of mental health issues. And if you can't start addressing the mental health issue, the housing simply will not work in and of itself. Fortunately, the legislature has started to recognize that as well. And over the past few years, there has been some strides made in recognizing that fact and providing what we're referring to as supportive housing. Housing that comes with wraparound services, caseworkers, mental health workers, it may be addiction issues. All of those combined need to be addressed to make the individual whole and healthy. Without one, you can't have the other and have success, but definitely there has to be a lot more in it. What we're hoping through Senate Bill 242 that provides not only for leasing, but for the acquisition and renovation of hotels and motels for non-congregate sheltering for individuals who are homeless. At some point then we need the service money to go with that so that individuals that are housed there can have those wraparound services that they desperately need.
Bruce, when would we start to see the implementation of that? When would that program actually go into effect?
Probably yet this year. The money will be allocated. It is part of the stimulus money. As I've seen, many of the bills have what's referred to as a safety clause in it, which means that the bill becomes effective upon signature of the governor. So at that point, essentially the money would be available. Internally, we'll have to develop some policies and procedures so that we have the ability to implement it equitably across the state. But certainly we'll be looking for proposals from communities in the nonprofit sector that's out there doing those kinds of services. Those are the ones currently named within the bill yet this year to submit proposals for that funding.
Mm-hmm. Bill, may I ask a second part of that question?
Please do.
Okay. About a couple, 3 years ago, there were 100 people who lived on the streets identified as sort of like the most challenged people. And they took them down, I believe, to the southeast region of the state and housed them and got a program so that they could get off of drugs and they would not be faced with that drug dealer right outside of, say, the motel or another housing in the big city. So do you see parts of that kind of protection and drug abuse help in housing also beyond just the normal supportive services?
We certainly do, Cindy, and thank you for that question. That's
Great.
the Fort Lyon program, and that is also operated by our department. We do that in conjunction with Colorado Coalition of the Homeless. We contract with them for the administration of the program. That is the old Fort Lyon facility located down in Bent County.
Okay.
And it's been really a very successful program. one in which the state auditor had audited this particular program by the department and had concluded as well that it is a successful program. When you're dealing with individuals from that population, you know you're going to have failures. But it's really a self-peer kind of program where they can be there for up to 2 years' time. There's part of the old campus that, if you may recall, that facility was originally constructed as a naval facility for individuals who were really infirmed back at the time. And then it transitioned into a prison for a short period of time and then became vacant. And we piloted this program down there to address those specific situations. Individuals have to voluntarily commit to being there. And they have to abide by the rules that are set. The rules have been set by really the residents who are there. They set the structure, the tone, the whole environment for the facility. I've been down there numerous times on some tours and really always walk away feeling very heartfelt and warm to see how this has transformed individuals' lives. Many of them have said they have been through countless numbers of rehab programs, and this is the one that has worked for them and saved their lives. Many people they know haven't had that luxury or that opportunity and have lost their life as a result of that. But it will work for some people and some people it will not. But we hope that there may be opportunities to expand that. That particular program does have limitations on how big it can be. But if there are opportunities to expand that in other regions of the state, and that if there are sufficient funding available for it as well, we will look to really grow that program as well. But it has been successful, and I'm glad you've heard about it. And we're very proud of the results we've had, and hope that we will continue operating that program down there as well. But it's one that's been well received by the community too.
Great. That's fantastic. I'm glad to hear an update. Could Fort Logan become that kind of facility too? Again?
Potentially. There's a lot of things that need to be evaluated when we look at one. As I had indicated, when we proposed this, it really was a joint venture with Bent County, Colorado Coalition of the Homeless,
Oh no, it looks like we're having some more technical difficulties. Hopefully Bruce's connection will start back up.
Oh, shoot. This is so good, Andrea.
I know it's such a great discussion and so much good information. Well, hopefully we'll manage to muddle through with the internet connection.
Andrea, you see Mindy's hand is up.
Oh, I did not see that. Mindy, we will make sure to get a question in, assuming we can get Bruce back on.
Am I back?
Oh, good.
Yes.
Oh, you are a highly valued speaker.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
Yeah, we seem to be having some connectivity issues, but you're coming through loud and clear. So please.
Very good.
I'm not sure exactly if you were done with the remark that you were making, or we kind of got cut off mid-sentence. So please feel free to finish your thought there.
Sure. I was just really emphasizing that for a facility like that to be successful, it does need a partnership from the community that it's located, the providers that we'll be working with. And we had that going into the Fort Lyon facility down there. And we're very grateful for it, because that helps drive success. As we, able to articulate what our values are as a society, it was a perfect fit down there. And Bent County continues to be a very active participant in that facility. They actually manage the facilities on site. The Colorado Coalition of the Homeless manages really the programmatic features of it. So we've got really those two very strong partners in helping make that program work, as well as being embraced by the community as a large.
Well, that is fantastic. We do have a hand up from Mindy. Mindy, please jump in with your question.
I actually have two. And the first is, it's delightful to hear that how the state is recognizing the need for supportive services for those who tend to be chronically homeless. And just from the experience in Jefferson County with homeless navigators, I'm having a sense that social workers and case managers and people who are working with that population are going to be in such high demand. It's going to be like our teachers. It's not a high-paying field, and they're poaching. One city will poach from a nonprofit to get someone as a social worker to help. So just a comment that the state may need to start looking at helping salaries for social workers the way that we have to help our teachers. Yes. But my actual question had to do with the Housing Bill 1271, HB 1271. And I live in a city here in Jefferson County that's sort of in a hybrid situation. They know they need more affordable housing. They have already adopted a few of the tools in the toolbox, like allowing accessory dwelling units and a little tweaks to their zoning codes for density and height and parking bonuses for affordable housing. And they did pay to have a root policy do an analysis of housing needs and surveys and come up with sort of a draft toolbox for them. But they really are at a loss of where to go. And so they sort of fall in a hybrid of the three boxes or the three types of plans that were mentioned in the text of that bill. They're not nascent novices, but they really need help. And that the technical assistance part will be so valuable to. So I'm not sure if in the bill you're looking at what a city would do that maybe has already adopted some tools, but just really needs help in moving forward. Thank you.
Certainly, and thank you for that question. That's not an uncommon situation across Colorado. Just the other day, we were on a stakeholder meeting, and one of the commissioners from Park County said, we've also adopted a lot of different incentives or tried to reduce barriers to create affordable housing. We can't get a builder to come up here and build anything. So you can take these actions and it doesn't guarantee results. But hopefully through time, as it does break down those barriers, there may be other things that can be done as well, that may be things people haven't quite thought about yet, but might be enough to kind of nudge it over the hill and get it on its way. That's really what we're looking to do through this bill, to help, one, create awareness, help reduce barriers, and help nudge projects over the hill. So we're hoping through a combination of these things, we will be able to really see some tangible results.
Well, I was thinking in terms of the city staff, if they were going to apply for one of those grants, I'm not sure if they would know which grant to apply for. So would you be offering assistance, even helping them figure out where they are on the continuum and what might be best for them?
Certainly, actually, I won't, but our staff that's more knowledgeable in these things than I ever will be doing that. Yes, that's one of the things that we do through our department. We know that through collaboration and cooperation are the way to make things successful. Our mission is to strengthen Colorado communities, and we live and die by that in our department. We're a small state agency. We have probably 200 or less employees, but very dedicated to our cause. So we have the Division of Housing, the Division of Local Government, which their sole mission is to work with cities, counties, and special districts. The Board of Assessment Appeal, if you're not happy with the valuation of your property and you've gone through your local channels to appeal it, you can appeal it there. And then we also have the Division of Property Taxation, which actually has nothing to do with taxation. It's all about the valuation. They train county assessors across the state for that we have equitable implementation of property tax law. We value companies that have statewide presence, like telecommunication companies, railroad companies, and we also grant the tax exemptions for religious and charitable organizations. So it has nothing to do with taxation, but all about valuations.
Thank you.
Other questions for Bruce? Kathy?
Here's a follow-up question to the new affordable housing bill. Is that just for cities and counties, or might it be available for nonprofits and churches who want to build affordable housing on their properties, that kind of thing?
Very good question, Kathy. This is targeted toward counties and municipalities, trying to break down the barriers that exist at the local levels through zoning or land use regulations that have slow review processes. They have higher bars that could maybe be reduced to help stimulate and get affordable done. We do have other programs where nonprofits and other entities can apply through our normal process for affordable housing projects. And we fund a good portion of those each and every year. I think we have roughly $9 million annually allocated for that effort. And as we know, those are oftentimes combined with tax credits. And if you think of a layer cake, that's how financing of affordable housing projects go. It takes oftentimes local incentives, tax credits, financing from multiple sources, and infusion of either grants or very low interest loans that we can provide to help get these deals done. We do what's usually referred to as the gap financing. So after virtually every other source has been exhausted, that last little bit that exists there is where we step in to get that project done. And as a result, oftentimes our projects that we're involved in are leveraged. We see our dollars leveraged anywhere from 10 to maybe 25 times the amount of money we put in is put in through other sources to get these done.
Yeah, great, thank you. And a different question. Over the last couple of years, there have been some bills that have required the Division of Housing to get inventories from the state and county unused properties and vacant land. Is that going to be incorporated into some of this planning as far as helping some of the municipalities find vacant land or properties that could be fixed up for affordable housing?
That's a great question, Kathy. And currently the law that has been passed requires the state agencies to list their vacant or inventories. And we post that list up on our website. We have, I think, seen maybe a couple of projects come forth as a result of that, where developers have identified either parcels or slivers of parcels that have that they could maybe add on to what they have to make it viable. One of the elements within 1271 is that local governments, that's one of the incentives that they could do, is actually do that at the local level. Create a list of existing vacant or underutilized parcels, whether privately or publicly owned, and have that list available too as another incentive, another tool for developers to utilize to see if any of those spaces would be suitable to put affordable housing on. So we're hoping to expand upon that through time and using that as a resource, another tool that individuals can use to help identify what might be viable pieces that are not currently being utilized to their highest and best use.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, I think we have a few more minutes. Any last questions for Bruce before we depart for the night?
I have one more.
Go ahead.
Bruce, is it your department that might collect data as to how many rentable units are open? And do you have any statistics on that?
That's a great question. What we do know is that we're sorely in the negative side of things. As indicated before, there are at least 315,000 Coloradan households that pay 50% or more of their income for housing. That's a severely house burdened household or income burdened household. We know that we do not have enough units. It's probably well over 100,000 units in deficit currently. But we don't, it does vary so much. And as we've seen, a lot of the construction happening, particularly in Denver, has not been, there's been some for affordable housing, but the majority of it has all been market rate. So as it continually evolves, we also face things that there are, for example, projects that we help finance, we require the developer to put in a restriction on their deed typically, that the unit or the development has to maintain those units for a period of time as affordable units, 20, 30 years, 40 years, something like that. It kind of depends on each and every development. So we're also faced, as time goes on, we see more of those units that fall off. So we have to not only meet the deficit that we currently have, but as units continue to fall off, we have to replace that stock as well. So we're always in a catch-up mode. I doubt that we will ever be fully caught up, but we'll keep working the best we can to try to meet those needs.
It would be great if there was any kind of data that said at 30% AMI or below, there are so many, not just available, but so many units in counties or divided up somehow. And then from 30 to 60 and then 60 to maybe 100 would be fantastic to have that kind of statistical data to help the legislature see how critical this is right now, I would think.
We will have some of that information. Also within our department is the state demographer. So
Oh,
we
yeah.
have that function within our department as well. And there's a lot of great information that we can pull there. And I can ask our staff what they have and what they can pull together and provide that to you as well.
Great. That would be Julie. Is she still there?
Who's that?
The state demographer.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
That'd be
yeah,
great.
she's still here and she's still fabulous.
Oh, she is. She's wonderful. Great. Thank you, Bruce.
Well, I think that takes us to the end of our time this evening. Bruce, I just want to extend a thank you on behalf of the League of Women Voters for joining us and providing us with all this great information. Thank you so much for your work on these issues. And thank all of you for attending and taking part in this important discussion. I just wish everyone a good evening and we'll see you soon. Good night, everyone.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great.
Bye-bye.